everybody keeps asking if you feel better today than you did 4 years ago. And for many people, the answer is pretty clear. Prices for everything they are buying have stabilized, but they haven't gone back down. The average household is now making more than ever before, but the median household is still worse off in real terms than they were in 2019, which means a lot of people are just falling further behind. That is, they are falling further behind the small group of households pulling the average up, and they are falling further behind on their own personal finances. Household savings have been eliminated, while credit card debt has climbed to its highest level in history.
Yeah, and why is that? I mean, reality is out of control inflation. People aren't making enough money to afford their expenses, so what they're having to do is put that on credit card debt. And when 20 to 30% of the US population has to put their daily expenses on credit card debt, that causes your debt to go up. You know,
Housing is
simple
less
math.
affordable than ever, especially for people who weren't lucky enough to lock in generationally low interest rates. And the
Right.
job market has been filled with automated systems, endless interviews, and roles that never really existed. Unemployment may be down, but that data point completely ignores the millions of people who have simply given up.
I mean, he makes a good point. The job market has been filled with useless positions because the powers that be are trying to create growth. You can't create artificial growth. You have to have tangible production that is worth something of value for that to be actual growth. You can't just make another job in a company that's already producing stuff and then expect that to grow more. That's not how it works.
There are a lot of real problems hurting a lot of real people. And the worst possible thing you can do is tell them how great everything is and how
Yeah.
grateful they should be.
We learned this morning that the economy's created 517,000
I don't believe that.
jobs just last
I
month.
don't believe
More than
that at
half a
all.
million jobs in just the month of
Bull
January.
crap.
Inflation at 2%,
I
unemployment
don't believe that.
4%, and the fastest growing economy in the G7 so far this year.
I don't believe that at all.
And we've done that while we've created on our watch 1 million jobs.
Alright, we gotta talk about it. 2024 has been the biggest election year in history, with
Mhm.
almost half of the world's population going to the polls to decide on who will represent them. In the elections that were free and fair, the incumbents have overwhelmingly struggled to hold on to power no matter what side of the political aisle they were on. A trend
enough,
which, of
yeah.
course, continued last week here in America. It's possible that no matter how perfect the campaign and how perfect the messaging was, the reincarnation of George Washington himself could have lost this election if he was the incumbent candidate. The reason for this huge shift, though, across all of these countries is that, yes, people are angry. According to poll after poll in country after country, the number one reason why people
Not just that, people are also tired. People are sick and tired of being told that inflation's going to go down and that if this person gets elected, things are going to change, and then things never change. You know, your average, in my opinion, I think your average person looks at, we're in a unique situation where we've had a Harris and a Trump presidency, because Harris was vice president of Biden and Trump was the president, right? So we're in a unique situation where I think most people are looking at this and going, gosh, what was benefiting me more? And how is my quality of life under this president? And they think about it, and I think most people are going, gas was a lot cheaper when Trump was president, and I was living a pretty good life, Times were good, and I think I'm going to vote for Trump, and that's what they do. They go vote for Trump.
want change is because they feel like they have been financially falling behind over the last political term. Now, this might not be completely fair. Governments across the world have been quick to point out that employment is up, inflation is down, the stock market is at all-time highs, and we managed to avoid a recession while recovering from COVID lockdowns. The problem is, these big picture figures haven't really mattered for a lot of people. Employment might be up, but layoffs are dominating the news cycle, and a lot of people who do lose their job are exiting the workforce entirely, making the figures look better than they really should be. The stock market might be at all-time highs, but stock ownership has become more concentrated than ever before. So this is
That's
only
all in
really
the
good for
hand
the
of
wealthiest households in the
investors,
world.
which is
When
good
there
for
are
them.
no
Yeah,
perfect
exactly.
candidates, or even decent candidates, it's a lot easier to vote for the team that can at least acknowledge there is a problem. Now, incumbent politicians hyping up their figures while downplaying the details is absolutely nothing new. But there are a
True.
few important reasons why it just isn't working anymore. And no, it's not because the average voter has studied up on financial literacy. The first reason is that, tragically, there actually have been some major wins for workers and consumers. The only problem is that politicians aren't allowed to talk about it. In just the last 4 years, the Federal Trade Commission has swung its regulatory dick around more than it has in the last 4 decades.
True.
The banning of non-compete agreements that stop workers looking for a better job, outlawing third-party apps that let landlords and businesses collude on prices through technology-driven middlemen, mandating a one-click cancellation on subscription services, and a much tighter grip on corporate consolidation and market power have been huge wins for the average American. Being able to job hop for better pay and benefits can go a long way to improving household incomes and making businesses actually compete for your dollar rather than just resorting to scummy sales tactics or monopolistic behavior is a great way to make prices, more competitive.
Yep.
The massive turnaround in administrative effect.
Sorry, I wanted to say something here real quick. The people who don't like this and go capitalism's bad, because this is part of it, right? You need capitalism because that's competition is good. It forces companies to innovate and compete for your money because that's what they want at the end of the day is your money. So if you're telling me you don't want to live in a capitalist society, then throw away your iPhone. That was invented by capitalism. Throw away your earbuds. That was also invented by everything that we enjoy in our modern society was kind of like these headphones. Capitalism. They created a product that I thought I liked and I bought it. I didn't have to go buy these headphones. I could have bought some other headphones.
Effectiveness has been largely thanks to the appointment of Lina Khan, someone who we have mentioned a lot on this channel, because she seems to be the first FTC chair in the last 40 years who isn't just interested in lining up a partner position at a corporate law firm after their appointment is up. These little changes have had more of an impact on everyday
Which is
people
good.
than they realize.
Monopolies are very
Unlike
bad.
adjusting interest
You
rates,
don't want
injecting
monopolies.
trillions of dollars into the economy, or any other blunt macroeconomic instruments that overwhelmingly just benefit wealthy asset owners, these smaller, more deliberate policies will actually help out regular people make more money and make.
I don't know much about this person, but the big problem that I'm seeing with this, that maybe How Money Works will elaborate on, is you can't just inject money into an economy and expect inflation to go down. That's not how it works. Money is tied to the assets that you produce. So if you do not produce anything and you're throwing money into an economy, that's what causes inflation. That's one of the huge reasons why our inflation has gone up is we printed all this money during COVID and we didn't make anything or produce anything to justify printing that money. So everyone got this money, but then everything skyrocketed because of inflation.
Make that money go further. The reason that Dems weren't screaming about these achievements through a megaphone throughout the entire campaign is because it hurts the feelings of one particularly sensitive minority group: billionaires.
Yeah, and if they're the ones that are controlling anything, of course they're going to not say stuff.
The FTC actually doing their job. Political donors and media outlets on either side wanted her gone at any cost. Unfortunately, the work of the FTC is boring, and people won't know about it if they aren't told about it. And people weren't going to be told about it because both sides were hoping to quietly make it go away after the election. Trump is clearly going to fire her on day one as he appoints new staff. And dealmakers have made no secret of the fact that they are going to push through a lot of mergers and acquisitions over the next year that just wouldn't have been possible with a more active FTC. Unsurprisingly, corporate consolidation like this might be great for investors, but it's terrible for consumers and workers. Stopping this was a clear win that nobody wanted to take credit for.
Depends on the mergers and acquisitions. If it's going to still have competition, there's not a problem with it. But the issue is if it becomes a monopoly. I mean, look at Disney. Disney owns Fox. They own Hulu. They own like a good portion of Marvel. They own all their own stuff. They own Pixar. How are they not being regulated to the ground? How are they not being broken up? It's corporate interests and people that rule the world that are keeping that, and there's lobbying and there's probably bribing involved. Let's be real here.
And that's just the first reason. So it's time to learn how money works to find out why telling people how great things are has been such a terrible message. This week's video is sponsored by Delete Me.
I'm skipping
Delete
this.
Me is a subscription
Don't care.
service that me. And it's amazing to see just knowing my data plans for the whole. take control of YouTube revenue
Next.
for 20
It's just an
is
ad.
another
Okay, here we
Z-list
go.
influencer on the internet telling people how they should feel about an election, especially since it's been 2 weeks late now.
You should feel however you want to feel about an election. As long as you're not acting like a complete lunatic, I really don't care how you feel. Just keep it civil, that's all I think.
But I still think it's important to acknowledge my own biases on these issues. I grew up in Ohio in a town made up of working class families, went to Ohio State, and then moved to California to work in high finance before making this channel, which mostly produces videos about what big institutions are doing to screw their consumers, their employees, and occasionally even their investors. I am uniquely lucky to have experienced the concerns of working class families and the wealthiest people in the country while putting together deals for their companies. Minus a little bit of ideological flexibility and some eyeliner, my background is almost identical to the vice president-elect.
And some
even though
eyeliner.
it's absolutely none
That's
of your
funny.
business, by watching my videos, it should be clear who I voted for. But yet, it isn't. There is one common theme throughout every video I make, and whether you realize it or not, it's probably why you keep on watching my goofy animations every week. It's simply the acknowledgement that there is actually a problem to begin with.
Right.
Here in the People's Republic of California, cities are spending billions of dollars to address homelessness.
No, they're not. I guarantee you they're just siphoning money into their own pockets, because if you solve homelessness, there's no money in homelessness, too. So they're not going to solve it if there's no way to benefit from it. So what they're doing is they're just saying they're spending money on supposedly solving this problem, and I guarantee you they're probably making money off of this.
And it's only
So why solve the problem if it's a moneymaker, you know? Or there's no okay, let me reiterate. There's no money to be made in solving homelessness. There is money to be made by exacerbating the problem and benefiting off of people who are homeless. That's why it will never be solved. That's what I meant to say. Sorry.
getting worse. The program's been
Exactly.
widely criticized for being ineffective with no clear delegation of responsibility.
It's because
If
they don't
most
want to
people
solve the
aren't
problem
employment
because they
providers,
make
which
money
means
off
even
of people
if they
being
provide no
homeless.
benefit, it's very politically difficult to roll these programs back. Now, the solution isn't to outlaw homelessness,
No,
but
of
it's
course.
also not rebranding the issue and asserting that it's not a problem to begin with. Because even the highly progressive people in these cities can only deal with so much San Francisco snow before they insist that the problem is at the very least acknowledged.
Right.
Of course, this is just one issue, and there are millions of people across the country and across the world that are dealing with worse problems than the largely wealthy residents in these major cities, which makes it
Right.
even more frustrating when genuine hardships are ignored. There is now the infamous example of $20,000.
Well, let's be real here. I'm not trying to be disingenuous or, crap on these people who are poor, but these politicians don't care about you. You know what they care about? They care about making money, and if that means utilizing your suffering or your unique situation as a way for them to get money, they're gonna do it. They're gonna do it. They won't even think twice about it. They'll do it.
Forgivable loans to be given to black entrepreneurs and pathways to support federal marijuana legalization. This was a very small program.
they're
that
doing
didn't
this
deserve as
to
much
get
attention
votes.
as it got, except for the fact that it made people feel like their struggles weren't acknowledged. Even highly progressive voices agreed that such a program should be based on economic need, not race. And for everybody
Exactly.
else, it was a clear example of a luxury belief.
Yep.
Robert Henderson is a political commentator who popularized this term in an article he wrote about his experience as a poor student attending Yale. His wealthy classmates not only had the financial ability to be politically active, since they didn't have to be as worried about losing their jobs or missing a few days of work, they also advocated for ideas that sound progressive but hurt the lower classes. One of the examples Henderson gave was the push to defund the police, a popular idea amongst wealthy college students who have never lived in an area where they needed the police to keep them safe. Roy Teixeira, a prominent left...
Well, I mean, think of it from their point of view, where they're living in these rich neighborhoods. Why do they, oh, well, I live in a really wealthy area where the crime is low. You don't need police. All they do is mooch off the system. That's probably what they're thinking. They're thinking they just get a paycheck and they don't do anything. But in reality, they're like taking bullets and they're stopping drugs and they're arresting criminals. But they're not in your neighborhood, so you're not, like he says, like How Money Works says, you're not involved in that. So of course your opinion is going to be defund the police because you don't think you need the police, but the moment you're going to need them, you're going to wish you would have funded them, tell you that much.
Left-leaning political scientist supports this finding through a report called Politics Without Winners. He found that 73% of non-white
Don't
working
mind me,
class
just drinking
respondents
my tea.
supported keeping police budgets intact.
I
However,
agree.
20% of white college grad liberals favored reducing police budgets.
Not a
Getting
good
rid of
idea.
a public service that people rely on for their safety sounds
Yep.
like the policy of the right, which just makes it more confusing for working people to figure out who is looking out for them. Now, the reason that politicians won't denounce these unpopular ideas or highlight achievements that would be genuine
Really, you should be learning self-defense and defending yourself, because police aren't always going to be there to protect you when you need it. It really comes down to, you know, personal accountability. I was trying to think of a word, but I think that's a good word. You should be learning to defend yourself. And if you feel like having a gun is a right option, go buy a gun and go learn how to use it. You know, be responsible with that, because it's people kill people, guns don't kill people. It's just a tool you use to get a job done. If you're going to abuse that power, then you shouldn't have it. But if you're going to have that power responsibly, then I don't see any problem with that.
genuinely popular is simply money and the power of loud voices. The big money donors still have
Yup,
an outsized influence on
exactly.
policy, and they do not want policy that will benefit consumers or workers at the expense of business owners, which means that the side that
Yeah, it's going to cost them money. They're going to tell them they don't want that. Because the interest of businesses is to make money. The interest of consumers is to save money. They're two conflicting interests, right? Consumers want to save money and get things very cheap because they don't have a lot of money. Businesses would rather sell things expensive, right? And make more money. So there's always going to be conflicting values. There's always going to be issues, and
was typically pro-worker
you're
came
going to have
across
to
these
figure it out.
issues. Now, I know it's not
But it's good to know this, because if you know it, you can better prepare and protect yourself against crappy people in the world.
exactly a radical take to say that big money in politics is problematic, but there is some good news in all of this. According to OpenSecrets.org, this year's election was the most expensive in
Dude,
history,
that's
with
so
over $15.9 billion spent by both
McDonald's
sides
Trump.
on the presidential,
That's
House,
funny.
Senate, and governorship
Oh,
races.
she looks a lot like her.
Adjusting for inflation, that's actually less than what was spent in 2020. Although maybe that's just because inflation has been a bit too high. Even here on YouTube, you might have noticed creators putting out more videos than usual, and that's because spending on the election was so intense that AdSense doubled over the last 2 months, and every available slot was bought up in hopes it would reach some random person in Pennsylvania. This channel normally makes about $4 for every 1,000 views it receives, but last month it was more like $7 since not all of you are watching from America. Just to keep up with this, politicians have had to keep their donors happy just as much as they have to keep their voters happy. But the good news, or maybe the bad news, is that it looks like we have hit peak advertising spend, and every additional dollar is falling well into the realm of diminishing returns. According to data from OpenSecrets, the candidates that spent the most overwhelmingly won their election, obviously with the exception of one particularly important race. There are only so many campaign ads that people can
You can throw money at specific problems, but I wouldn't say that that's the end-all be-all, because there are specific things, like in video games we've seen, that throwing money at it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. It just, I think, in my opinion, it depends on the situation. When it comes to funding your campaign, most of that funding should, I say should, because I don't believe all of it goes to funding a campaign. It goes to traveling, it goes to living expenses, it goes to actually booking arenas, it goes to hiring security to make sure nothing crazy happens. There's a lot that goes into a campaign.
watch before they get fed up with both sides. And unfortunately, we are now well into the realm of diminishing returns. It's
So, sorry, I didn't finish my point. In that case, spending more would be beneficial, because if you can cover more ground and do more press conferences and have discussions with people, you're more likely to have people vote for you.
understandable to be angry at the results of the election. It's understandable if you were voting or chose not to vote because you were angry at the problems that matter to you not being addressed. And it's understandable
that's
to
fair.
be angry because the other side will be even worse. Either way, you should remember that if your team won, things are not going to be as good as they promised, and if your team lost, things are not going to be as bad as they warned. I hope. Now, there is one group above all that nobody wants to recognize as falling behind, and that's working-aged men. They were a major demographic that voted on these very issues. So go and watch this video to find out, aside from voting, why young men are simply choosing not to work and
And that's basically it. I mean, he makes a lot of good points, but if you know anything about how corrupt our government is, and I'm in the US, so if you're, you know, not in the US, I'm not sure how your government works, but you know, they're not in it for you. They're in it for themselves. They're looking at how to make the next big dollar. And the reason why a lot of our problems have never been solved is because there's more money to be made in not solving the issue than there is to solve the issue. If they solve homelessness, there's probably $20 million, $30 billion. I don't know. I don't know the logistics, you know. Why do you think the housing crisis hasn't been solved? Why do you think there's not affordable homes? Because there's profit to be made in crisis. People want affordable homes. People want more homes readily available. Well, if they do that, then the homes that are already available go down in value. So that doesn't really benefit the homeowner. They're like, oh, well, now my asset's going down. Well, that sucks. But if they keep putting luxury condos everywhere and raising the price, then homes are going to go up because now all you have is expensive housing. If you don't believe me, look it up. Go look up in your area how much luxury condos and apartments they're probably building in your area. There's a whole bunch in my area. I'm in Utah. They're coming up. They're building them like freaking the woodworks. They're what's it called? I don't remember. I'm out of touch with the sayings, but they're building them. They're raising like empires, you know. They're just back and forth. Go look in your local area, like Zillow it. Seriously, you'll see luxury condos coming soon, luxury apartments coming soon. There's no single family homes, and if there are, they're very few and far between. There's more luxury townhomes and apartments than there are single family homes. So until that problem gets rectified, you're going to see the housing issue consistently be a problem. The costs are going to go up. People are constantly going to be strained. What needs to happen is people need to have this shift that people need. Well, really, an ideal situation would be demand just follows flat, but then that would cause a recession. Demand needs to be just low enough where it's incentivizing builders to build cheaper homes and address the issue, but I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, there's so many things that I could go in, but I don't want to. But I appreciate you for watching and have a great rest of your day.